As MLB awards are announced later this month, the hope is that Colton Cowser will be the second consecutive Oriole to win American League Rookie of the Year. But let's break down his entire season in general, the massive ups, the massive downs, the cow costumes, and some of the biggest swings and defensive plays from Cowser in his rookie 2024 season. That's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are beginning our 2024 Orioles Player Season Review Series. We're going to take a look at every player on the O's 40-man roster, break down how their 2024 seasons went, and talk about the biggest questions for them heading into the offseason and into 2025. And on today's episode, we begin it all with the milkman himself, Colton Cowser. There were ups, there were downs, but he's in line to win a major award. We will talk about all of it, what went right in his season, what went wrong in his season, and what is really his biggest question heading into 2025. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball, and get the Booking.com app today. So let's break down Colton Cowser's season, the milkman himself bursting onto the scene this year for the Orioles. Had such a fantastic spring training that he made this Orioles roster. Now, he debuted in 2023, 26 games, 77 plate appearances, but we know how poorly it went. He hit just 115. He had a 40 WRC plus. He came up in August. He went back down, wasn't with the team for most of September. Heston Kjerstad kind of took his spot and was not on the 2023 postseason roster. So Cowser had something to prove coming into spring training this year, and he proved it. He was exceptional in the spring, the bat, the defense, all of it was everything that the Orioles saw when they drafted him 5th overall in the first round of the 2021 MLB draft. And he made the team. Now, he didn't make the team as an everyday player. Austin Hayes was still cemented in there in left field for the O's, and they had some other options. They knew they were going to play Mullins and Santander every day, and Cowser had to break through a bit. But Austin Hayes started really, really slow. He seemed to be a little bit injured, a little bit sick as well. And Cowser pretty early in April was able to take over that left field role. And while he swooned a bit at times during the season, he really never fully gave it up. His final stats in his first full big league season, 153 games for Cowser and 561 plate appearances. He hit .242 with a .321 on base percentage and a .447 slugging. That's good for a .120 WRC plus, making him 20% better than a league average hitter. Cowser had 24 doubles, 24 home runs, and drove in 77. Picked up 9 stolen bases as well. A 9.3% walk rate, better than league average. A 30.7% strikeout rate, a little bit concerning, which we'll get to as well. But overall, a good season. He was fantastic defensively and was worth 4.0 wins according to FanGraphs, which puts him right up there among all rookies in Major League Baseball. Let's start with what went right in Cowser's first full season in 2024, and that is he just might win the American League Rookie of the Year. Now, the voting is already in. We just won't know until later in October who has won the award, but his 4.0 F4, that led all American League rookies, and he was 3rd in FanGraphs WAR in baseball among rookies. Only Jackson Merrill of the Padres and Paul Skeens, the Pirates, both, of course, in the National League, had higher numbers than Cowser this season. And if Cowser does win the Rookie of the Year, the Orioles will get one of those PPI draft picks that they got last year for Gunnar winning, because Cowser was on the opening day roster, stayed up all year, and then wins the award. And it awards teams for calling up their good young players on opening day and not trying to fiddle with their service time. Now, that's really good. The other contenders, Luis Gil and Austin Wells of the Yankees are certainly in there. Maybe I don't know, a Cade Smith of the Guardians or a Mason Miller of the Athletics or a Wilyer Abreu of Boston. Either way, statistically, Cowser should be the winner. We'll see if anybody else gets that Yankee bump. Probably Luis Gil because he's a starting pitcher and he was really, really good to start the year. But Cowser's got a really good shot, it would seem, to win that award. Now, another thing he did right, he impacted the baseball, which is fantastic to see. I mentioned the 24 homers and the 24 doubles. A 13.6% barrel rate for Colton Cowser led the Orioles, and a 46.1% hard hit rate on the season. A very, very good number for Colton. And that's something we've always known. That's something the Orioles knew basically as soon as they drafted him out of Sam Houston State. That this is a guy who can impact the baseball, and he did it all throughout the minor leagues. If you're watching here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, again, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. You are seeing the screenshot of Colton Cowser's Baseball Savant page. That is courtesy of Baseball Savant and StatCast, with all those nice red and blue sliders, and you can see the barrel rates, the hard hit rates, the xWOBA, all that good stuff is way, way up there, which you certainly love to see from Colton Cowser. Now, some of the other things, though, that's interesting, while he hits the ball hard and he barrels the ball, and his average exit velocity was over 90 miles an hour, which is really good, his squared up percentage, his sweet spots percentage, more on the low end than the bottom quarter of Major League Baseball. So he's a hitter who hits it hard, but doesn't necessarily always completely square it up right where he needs to. And that may lead to less hits overall. And that is where, despite all the hard hit numbers and the good production, he still ends up with a 242 batting average. Also has really good bat speed. StatCast introduced the bat speed metric for the first time this year to the public, and that was really good for Cowser as well. We know when the swing is right, he's going to hit the ball hard, hit the ball far, and do damage, and that is what the Orioles want. And the other thing that was really good and went really right is that he can get red hot. And from those numbers, you can tell that, hey, when he starts to swing it well, he's going to get scorching hot. And that is how he started his season. In the month of April for Colton Cowser, I guess March/April, he hit 303 with a 1004, 1,004 OPS, and a 184 WRC plus in the month of April. And that included his moment of the year. This is something we're going to do for every player we review here on this podcast over the next couple of months, is their moment of the year. And I want to take you back to April 11th at Fenway Park in Boston. Colton Cowser, in a big Orioles win in 10 innings over the Red Sox, hits his first 2 career home runs. The first one, an opposite field shot over the monster, and then that second one, the 3-run homer in the top of the 10th that put the game away, an absolute bomb. Orioles giving him the green light on a 3-0 pitch, and he destroyed a fastball, pimped it. It was awesome. 114 off the bat, 438 feet to right center field to put the game out of reach. It ended up being his hardest hit ball of the entire season because he just destroyed that baseball back in April. And it wasn't the only time he got hot. He never got as hot as he was in April, but even in July, he had a 162 WRC plus in July. He had a 133 in the second half. He really finished strong for the O's, which was great. And he could carry this offense at times. He kind of did it in April, though everybody was swinging it well. He did it at times in July. That is really nice to know that you can put him in the middle of the order and he can carry you when you need it. And the final thing that really went right for Colton Cowser is that he was incredible in the field. We came out of 2023 saying, okay, Cowser's a good defensive outfielder. You know, if you put him in the corners, you feel good. But he had to play some center field for the Orioles last year. And between watching him there and in AAA Norfolk play center, I had a lot of questions about his center field defense. Now, he certainly didn't play an incredible amount of center field this year. Cedric Mullins was able to stay mostly healthy, and the O's sent him out there. But Cowser did get 310 innings in center field, -1 defensive run saved, 1 outs above average. He's still, to me, an average center fielder out there, but I thought he was well below average, so that is a good sign. However, left field at Camden Yards is almost like a second center field out there. It is vast. There's a lot of room to cover. You got to have a good arm. And that is where Cowser shined. That was his everyday position this year. And his 11 outs above average out there in the outfield this season was tied for 20th best in Major League Baseball across all defenders, 8th among outfielders, 2nd among left fielders, and it led the Orioles. Quite frankly, Colton Cowser, if he is not a Gold Glove finalist in left field in the American League, it is a travesty, and he has a really good shot to win a Gold Glove and win Rookie of the Year in his first season. StatCast fielding run value is another kind of all-encompassing defensive stat that StatCast has, was 10. That led all left fielders in Major League Baseball this year. He was also 17th in baseball in terms of StatCast arm strength, so he showed off his really good arm. It has a little issues with accuracy at times, but the arm strength is really good, and you need that in that big left field. He was just so superb defensively that allowed him to accrue and be a 4-win player this year because the defense was so good when he was out there in left. And when you had Cowser in left and Mullins in center, not much was falling in against that Oriole outfield. It was really fun to see Cowser play left field that way this season. But it wasn't all amazing this year. And a lot of his great stats are propped up by a couple of incredible months from Colton Cowser. He had his struggles as well. So coming up next, we flip it to the other side. What went wrong in Colton Cowser's rookie season in Baltimore? But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, Booking.yeah. You can explore the U.S. cities you always secretly wanted to learn more about, with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. And maybe it's time to taste test that baseball competition stadium cuisine. Well, luckily on Booking.com, you can find the stadium stay that is just right for you. And maybe you were, thinking about going to a place like New York for the ALDS. Didn't happen for the Orioles. Well, you could still check out New York for the ALDS if they come back for Game 5. What you could also do, I feel like a lot of us are cheering on the Royals to take down the Yankees. You could travel to Kansas City this week for Games 3 and 4 of the ALDS. You can get an amazing hotel on Booking.com. They deliver exactly the right stay in the U.S. for you. And that right stay, it can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. And you can find it all at Booking.com. Booking.yeah. So we are chatting about the milkman, Colton Cowser, and reviewing his 2024 season, his first full season with the O's. And we flip it to what went wrong for Cowser this year. And the first thing was there was a lot of swing and miss in his game. And it certainly became an issue, especially later in the year. As I mentioned, his 30.9% strikeout rate on the season was higher than any minor league level, which is usual for a rookie as well. Those strikeouts are going to go up when you start facing big league arms. But also essentially led the Orioles qualified hitters. Among Orioles who had at least 250 plate appearances this year, which is kind of at least a part-time player, his 30.9% strikeout rate was the highest on the team. He kind of filled in that part. He also had a 30.3% swing and miss rate. That was in the 50 highest whiff rates in all of baseball, and also was the highest swing and miss rate among qualified Orioles hitters this year as well. So if you're banking on somebody to strike out in the O's lineup, the first guy you would go to is Colton Cowser. And that's why he wasn't able to really fully ascend to what he could have been this season. He hits the ball hard. He hits the ball out of the ballpark. He has a pretty good batting eye with the walks. He plays incredible defense, but he is your main strikeout problem in the lineup. And when you hit the ball hard and you have great exit velocities and you barrel the ball, that's all great. But if you have a swing and miss rate of over 30%, you're not going to get to that power and get to that tool if you just can't make contact with the baseball enough. And that was Cowser's biggest problem this year, just not enough contact. And the pitch that gave him the most trouble was a changeup or a splitter, essentially an off-speed pitch. Against those pitches this year, Cowser hit 171 with a 43% swing and miss rate. 61% of those balls he put in play against a changeup or a splitter were on the ground. Just an 85 mile per hour average exit velocity against those pitches that doesn't end up in a lot of hits. Had a 66 WRC plus against changeups this year. That is not good. Again, if you were watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, you're going to see right now how pitchers, specifically here right-handed pitchers with good changeups, which usually work against lefties, how they attacked Colton Cowser this year. And I'm going to start with Colton Cowser's strikeout percentage versus changeups by zones in the strike zone. This chart is courtesy of Baseball Savant and StatCast. You can see it right here. Colton Cowser On down and away changeups, mostly pitches that started in the zone, faded down and away out of the zone, he struck out 56% of the time. And if you include down and in, 64% of the time. Basically, if you just threw Colton Cowser a changeup down, he was not going to hit it. And not only did he have troubles hitting the ball hard on changeups, he was going to swing and miss frequently. And the book was out on Cowser for most of this season. If you were a righty, changeup down and away, changeup basically away at all, you got him every single time. And you could see it, like, he wasn't striking out on changeups up in the zone at all, as you can see on his chart. That's because guys, they weren't throwing it there. They knew, even if it wasn't a perfect changeup, right? The perfect changeup is it looks like a fastball in the outside corner and then it fades down and away out of the zone and you chase it. Guys knew that even if it wasn't the perfect changeup, even if it started in the middle of the zone and ended up near the knees, he'd still swing and miss. They knew even if it started right around the knees or below and dropped way below the zone, he just couldn't identify that pitch. He would go into protect mode and he'd swing at a changeup that almost ended up in the dirt for strike 3. It was a huge issue for Cowser. And it's not just the strikeouts. You might say, okay, Connor, but at least maybe when he is putting the ball in play, is he getting any success? No, because this chart is his batting average against changeups in terms of areas of the strike zone. Even when he did try to make some contact on those pitches down and away, and he didn't do it a lot, he was hitting 0.32 on those changeups down and away and 0.77 on the changeups down and in. He's hitting well under 200 basically on anything on the outer part of the plate against those changeups. And I mentioned that high ground ball rate of 61% against changeups this year. Basically what happened was, even when Cowser would have enough wherewithal to get the bat on it, he would roll the ball over to second base or first base every single time, like clockwork, a slow ground ball to the second baseman, and he'd be out. So even when he could put the ball in play, he wasn't flicking that changeup the other way, blooping into the left field for a base hit. He was just rolling it over. So guys knew, okay, even if I can't get the strikeout here, I'm going to get Cowser out with a changeup down and away. And it was pretty automatic. If you threw him a pitch there, he was going to get himself out. And even if you threw it in the strike zone, you were going to get him out because he might make contact, but it was just a slow rollover. He rarely had any extra base hits against changeups. I think you count them on one hand, the amount of extra base hits he had against righty changeups this year. He's got to figure that out. He just absolutely has to figure that out. And he also whiffed about 40% against breaking balls, and that's an issue too. But he also hit 260 against curveballs and sliders this year. So even though he was swinging and missing, when he made contact, he was still productive against those breaking pitches. That's not the case against the changeups. When he did make contact, he was still really bad. And we know how good Colton Cowser was against fastballs this year. You can't deny it that if you threw him a fastball, that's when he was going to do his damage. He was slugging 542 against those fastballs this year, and 17 of those home runs came against fastballs, 6 others against breaking balls. Only 1 home run came against an off-speed pitch this year. The book was out on Colton. -7 was his StatCast run value against changeups this year. That was the second worst in Major League Baseball. Only Astros catcher Yainer Diaz was a worse hitter against changeups in the majors this year. That is certainly a problem. Can he figure it out? And it also did kind of seem like that a lot of those issues with the changeups came in the big moments. If a pitcher could execute that changeup against Cowser in a big moment, he just did not come through. He was only 3 for 19 with the bases loaded in the regular season. And we know how his final at-bat of the year went. Bases loaded, 1 out, 1-1 game in the bottom of the 5th in game 2 of the wild card series. Angel Zerpa, the lefty, comes out of the bullpen for the Royals and throws a 1-2 sinker that would have hit Colton Cowser in the back if he had just stood there and turned his back. It would have been an RBI hit by pitch, and the Orioles would have taken a 2-1 lead and probably changed the entire complexion of that game 2 that they lost. Instead, he goes into full swing mode at 1-2, goes around too far on a sinker that hits him in the hands. So he gets hit, he fractures his hand, he eventually has to come out of that final Orioles game, and he strikes out in the biggest spot of his career on a pitch that was going to hit him. That's how bad it got. Now, luckily, with the hand fracture, we don't know a lot yet, but he should be all good to go for spring training and opening day next year. He's got months to rehab that after the injury, but not a good way to end your season. And here's the other thing we're going to do with these player reviews episodes. We're going to do the moment of the year, and we're also going to do the stat of the year. And it wasn't just bases loaded. It was all of those high leverage opportunities. Via FanGraphs, their high leverage is basically, hey, is it late in the game? Is it close? Could you change the game with a big swing here? That is kind of the loose definition of those high leverage plate appearances. Colton Cowser had 55 such high leverage plate appearances in the regular season this year for the Orioles. He was by far, among Orioles who had at least 15 high leverage plate appearances. Remember, Colton had 55. He was by far the worst Orioles hitter in those high leverage spots. And I talked a lot down the stretch when the Orioles were really, really struggling offensively with runners in scoring position about what are the O's doing differently? Why are they struggling so much? And talked a little bit about, like, do the O's, some of these guys just get tight in these spots, get nervous, just not have that dog in them. Cowser was kind of the worst culprit of this. In 55 high leverage plate appearances this year, Cowser hit just 155, struck out 35% of the time, and had a 12, that is right, 12 WRC plus in those situations this year. Again, by far the worst of any Orioles hitter. That is not good, and it's a lot of the times because guys were throwing him changeups. He was kind of flailing at him and did not come through. So we know there's been all the great stuff, the amazing defense. He was a really good base runner this year as well. He hit the ball hard. He hit home runs. He was leader in home runs for rookies. He was a productive hitter. He was 20% better than the league average. But he shrunk in the big moments. And there was one pitch, especially in the second half, even when he was hitting the ball well, that people knew, like, hey, this is how you can get Colton Cowser out. And because of that, you'll see on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page here, again, this via StatCast, his rolling WOBA charts for 50 plate appearances at a time throughout the season. I mean, it's just a complete roller coaster for Cowser this season. The high ups, the low downs. You got to try to find at least a little bit more consistency as well. And he was much better in the second half after he really struggled in May and June. He kind of pulled his season back together. Again, I mentioned a 133 WRC plus after the All-Star break was good news for Cowser, but that basically was like when guys were not throwing him strikes or throwing him fastballs. When they could throw him a changeup, they were pretty much getting him out every single time this year. So you do kind of have to figure out how to just be a little more consistent and find out how to hit that changeup. And that's where we will end with this one. There were high highs, there were low lows for Colton Cowser. So what is his biggest storyline heading into the offseason and then into 2025? We will answer that to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Hey, maybe you're looking at the next couple of weeks. Maybe you want to place that bet on the Ravens. Maybe you want to look at season win totals and see the Ravens playing a little bit better and place it there as well. And you can do it all at FanDuel.com. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by GameTime. Now, GameTime, we know it's an amazing place to buy tickets to Orioles games, MLB games, and other things, but GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, unfortunately, there are no more Orioles tickets to buy here in 2024, but there are still plenty of games, plenty of shows in the area, concerts, comedy shows, and you can get those tickets at GameTime. The GameTime Picks, the curation makes it easier to save on all of these events, and the all-in pricing is great. If you turn this feature on, there's no surprise fees at checkout. That might be the best part. And they've got a lowest price guarantee at GameTime, or they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. So to finish up on Colton Cowser's 2024 season, we talk about what is next for him. What is the biggest storyline heading into 2025? Because it was still a productive year, 120 WRC plus, worth 4 WAR, might be the rookie of the year, might win a Gold Glove. He was, pretty solid against lefties. He wasn't like any kind of guy who you couldn't play against a left-hander. He was just slightly below league average. That was good, and he crushed righties at times as well when they didn't throw him a changeup. But I think the biggest storyline going into next year is just, can he fix that changeup hole in his swing? I mentioned all the issues: 171 average, 43% swing and miss, big strikeout rates, just bad against that pitch. It was the easy way to attack him. He's a valuable defender. He can do damage with the bat. So he certainly has a high floor as a player because he hits the ball hard, plays a great left field. At worst, if he really tanks somehow, he'd still be a really good fourth outfielder for your team. But he also has a really high ceiling with how hard he impacts the baseball. But there's an easy way to get him out. And he can't reach that ceiling if it's still this easy to just get Colton Cowser out with a changeup. So this offseason, he's got to work on attacking and seeing that changeup, or guys are going to keep throwing it. And the one big worry I have is the fact that he broke his hand on the final day of the year. And again, he still should be ready to go for spring training and opening day, and that should be all good. But it is a little concerning that he is going to miss time in the offseason. And that's not nearly as bad as missing time during the season. We know that. But when you have one specific thing to work on, and you've got a broken hand, which makes it really hard to do any baseball activities, especially swinging and a bat and contacting a ball, that's going to, I think, knock down some of his timeline on fixing his number one flaw right now. And he's certainly going to be able to work on other things, but that broken hand can really limit what you can do in an offseason, even if you are going to be fully ready for spring training. So what I think could happen for Cowser is it's a lot of those pitch identification drills where you don't have to swing. You're just at the plate. You're seeing changeups and breaking balls and fastballs and identifying. Change up away, and just holding up on those pitches. Because here's the thing I would honestly be fine with Cowser doing in 2025. If he's going to still struggle against this pitch, even if he's taking a called strike 3 on some changeups that do, dot at the knees or dot the outside corner, that's fine. Because if he swings that far in that direction and he's able to lay off a lot more of those changeups that fade down and away for a ball, even if he has more strikeouts looking on that pitch, pitchers eventually are going to shade away from throwing that changeup if they know, hey, Cowser can't hit it, but he's going to lay off it if I throw it down and away. And they're going to be worried, if I don't hit my spot, he's going to take a walk here. Let me throw a pitch I know I can throw a strike with and see if he attacks it. And then, because he's better against the breaking balls and he's much better against the fastballs, he can do some more damage. I'm okay if that's the plan heading into 2025. We'll see what that would be, but I'd be okay with that if it ends up with, hey, more called strikeouts, maybe less swinging strikeouts and less weak ground balls to second base. I think that would be a net positive for Cowser, but I'm really intrigued to see what he's able to do this offseason as he just kind of begins it here with this broken hand. But the final thoughts on Colton Cowser, listen. He became a fan favorite. He seems to be an awesome guy to be in this clubhouse, just brings that silly, goofy mood essentially in that clubhouse, kind of a vibes guy. And so far what we've seen is it was a good first round pick by the Orioles. Really, really productive player. I think deserves rookie of the year. I think deserves a good Gold Glove in left field. That is a lot of great stuff for your first full MLB season. Yeah, it was frustrating because he really struggled in the big moments at the plate, but there were still moments where he really came through. I mean, really came through for this Orioles team. The crack of the bat on a big Cowser homer, there's kind of nothing like it for some of these Orioles with how hard he can impact the baseball. It's fun to watch him play left field. He runs the bases really well. I really like having Colton Cowser on this team. I think he's a big part of this roster. I think he can be an even more productive hitter in 2025 with some of these changes. And when you take what he can do with the bat, with the base level of the great defense, it's not out of the question at all that Colton Cowser could be an all-star in 2025. He can figure out the changeup. I would call it a really, really good first full season in the big leagues for the Milkman and Colton Cowser. And it doesn't hurt that he's got fans dressing up in cow outfits every single game because Baltimore truly does love their left fielder that much. And honestly, seems like a smooth transition replacing Austin Hayes as that everyday left fielder for the Orioles. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will continue later this week with these player season review series as we'll get through all the guys on the O's 40-man roster and also, of course, get you any Orioles offseason news that comes in this week as we are back for a Wednesday episode coming up tomorrow. But until then, I am Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.